everyone, and welcome to today's Best Practice Network webinar, The Power of Why, the Key to Uniting Employees Around Your Company Vision. My name is Tess Starbrough, and I'm the Marketing Manager here at VolunteerMatch and the coordinator of these Best Practice Network webinar series. And I'm joined today by the star of the event, Stephanie Staidle, founder of the Right Brain Entrepreneur. Before we get into the content and turn things over to Stephanie, I just have a few housekeeping notes. You will automatically be on mute, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. So please type any questions that you have into the question box on the right side of your screen. And at the end of the webinar, we're going to do our best to get through as many of these questions as possible. And during the webinar itself, Stephanie will have some questions for you. You can also post questions or live tweet observations, takeaways, etc. on Twitter using the hashtag VMBPN. Just think VolunteerMatch Best Practice Network, VMBPN. I will be live tweeting as well through the VolunteerMatch Solutions Twitter handle, which is VM_solutions. So feel free to interact with us on there as well. One of the most popular questions that we get is regarding the slides. You will receive a copy of the slides and a link to the recording of this webinar sometime after the webinar is over today. And finally, the computer audio feature on GoToWebinar is not necessarily consistent across computers, headphones, etc. So if you are having trouble hearing, you can try dialing in via phone if you're able. And you can find that number on the right side of your screen and also in your email. The Best Practice Network webinar today is brought to you by Solutions by VolunteerMatch. Just a quick blurb about us. Our primary belief at VolunteerMatch is that it should be easy to make a difference. As the web's largest volunteer engagement network serving over 100,000 nonprofits, we take that belief very seriously. And that's why we offer a range of options for companies, brands, and organizations to take their giving programs to new levels. To find the solution that's right for you, visit solutions.volunteermatch.org. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Stephanie. Hello, Stephanie.
Hi. Can you see my screen, Tess?
Yes.
Okay, great. We're ready to roll. Okay, well, thank you for having me here today. I know there's a lot of different things that everyone here on this webinar could be doing at 11 o'clock on a Friday. And I'm really excited to talk to you about something that I'm very passionate about, which is the power of why. And I'm going to be talking about what is a why, what makes it so important, and how you can find your why if you haven't already, or get clearer on your why as a company, and then use the why of your employees and your team for more engagement and better performance. But I wanted to get a feel for who's on this call first, and so Tess is going to be helping me in regards to all the questions and things. So if people could just type into the question box who you are, what company you work for, are you someone that owns the company, or are you someone that is responsible for the volunteer program? So just kind of introduce who you are so I can get a feel for who's on this call today.
Hi, Stephanie. So I'll start reading you a couple of the answers coming in.
Great, thanks.
We have a community relations director on the line, someone here who is in charge of the volunteer program at Twilio. Nevada Volunteers, a nonprofit organization related, and she works on initiatives related to volunteer engagement. Community outreach coordinator, director of volunteer services, public affairs director. These are coming in too fast for me to read, but they all look very interesting. Sustainability and corporate responsibility person, community engagement specialist. Looks like a lot of community engagement.
Perfect.
Volunteer program coordinator.
Great, great. That's helpful. Just so as I'm talking today, I can address what might be some of the concerns of that particular group. So that's really, really helpful. All right, I'm going to start to move in to the nuts and bolts then. And, you know, we are talking about this thing called why. And some of you on this webinar may already feel like you know your why personally, or your company already has a mission. And it doesn't matter where you fall on the spectrum of business vision. I really promise that everyone here is going to get a lot of value out of what I talk about today. And also everything that I'm talking about is based in the newest findings of psychology and neuroscience, which makes it even more interesting. I wanted to start by introducing myself a little bit and sharing my own personal story and a little bit about me. I am a licensed art therapist, and I'm also a coach. And I have been studying psychology for 18 years. I have a bachelor's from Georgetown University and a master's in art therapy from NYU. And it's been amazing, all the things that I've learned about how our brain works. And I actually started in the corporate world. I did a lot of marketing and advertising for several years with companies such as American Express and Clear Channel. And for me, after several years of this, it just felt like something wasn't meaningful for me, that there was some fulfillment that was lacking. And so I did some soul searching for myself, and I went back to school, and that's when I went and got my license in art therapy. And then I went into the nonprofit world, where I spent several years working with individuals and families using the psychology of creativity to help them overcome challenges. And it was really amazing to me to see how quickly and effectively they were overcoming these barriers using these newest findings of neuroscience and how our brain works. The psychology of creativity is fairly new in that particular world, and I was really inspired to bring this to the masses. I just felt I was limited in my outreach by working at this nonprofit, and so that's why I started my own company, which is called the Right Brain Entrepreneur. And now I do coaching and workshops with companies and individuals using these methods and having them really access their innate potential and their amazing capacity for creativity. And some of the methods that I might be talking about today may seem a little new and a little radical, and it's because they are. And it's also been really humbling because I've been featured as an expert on NBC, TEDx, and South by Southwest. So it's something I'm really passionate about talking about. And it wasn't always this way for me, having this amazing company where I get to make a difference. There was a moment in my life that I felt was kind of my lowest point, which was when I had built my life in a particular direction that I thought was what I wanted. I was chasing this kind of money ideal of a lifestyle, trying to do online marketing. I bought into one of these, make $10,000 in 3 months kind of programs. And at the time, I was in a very serious relationship with a man that lived in Switzerland. And one day we're on Skype, and he says to me, "Stephanie, I can't do this anymore." And I was completely shocked. So he ended the relationship, and I didn't even know who I was at that point. And I didn't, here I was creating this life based off of what he and I said that we wanted to do together, and I was kind of chasing what I thought I was supposed to have, and it all fell apart. And I remember, I had to move in with my parents, which was really humbling at the age of 30, and I felt so lost. And it was at this point where I started to go into deeper work with myself, and this is when I discovered my why. And when I discovered my why, it changed everything for me. It's when I felt I really had this confidence in knowing who I was, what I was here to do, the impact I wanted to have on the world, and this is when I created the Right Brain Entrepreneur. And my why has been the leading direction and compass for me as I've started my own company, and it's made things so much easier for myself, and it allows me to overcome challenges in a way that I see a lot of other entrepreneurs and companies not able to do. And that's why I'm just so passionate about talking about the power of why. It changed my life, and it changes everything for the companies and the individuals I work with. So that's a bit of a vulnerable story, but I share that because I've been through this process of being so lost and not knowing the deeper parts of myself and what I was doing with my business. And that's a large part of why I now do this with other companies. So let's get into the power of why and how this is the key to success in business and in terms of employee engagement, which I know a lot of you here are looking for new solutions there. So what happens is, one of the biggest problems I see with companies and individuals is that when we're stuck, we think that if we do more, then we'll have more. So this is a very natural reaction that we have as human beings. If I do more, I'm going to have more results. In actuality, what we've been finding over the last 2 decades of science research is that what's really at the foundation of success is our mindset, meaning how we think about things, what our beliefs are. And so now that we know all these things about brain science, it's really important to integrate this to build a strong foundation for success in your business and in any program that you create. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is not so much the doing, but how can you think differently about some of the problems and barriers you're up against in regards to your company vision and uniting your employees around your volunteer program or any other program or activities. So I need to give you a really quick science lesson to explain a little bit more. In the 1970s, Roger Sperry won a Nobel Prize for his split brain studies. In these studies, he discovered that our brain is divided into 2 hemispheres, the left and the right. And more importantly, he discovered that each hemisphere is responsible for a different kind of process. So the left brain is responsible for our verbal process. So as I'm speaking to you right now, it's mostly being processed through my left hemisphere. And it's also very logical and formulaic. So the left brain, when we are up against something, our left brain will kind of come in and go through the past and look for the best solution based off of our experiences in the past. So it'll say, okay, if I do A plus B, then I know that I'll most likely be able to come up with this solution of C. So it's very analytical and reality-based. The right brain does not use language whatsoever. It only takes in information in imagery and in visual. And so it's also a very emotive center. So in the field of art therapy, what we're discovering is that the more that we were taking clients into this process of using visual means, such as art making, that it was tapping into a very subconscious part of their brain. So there's a connection between the visual and the deeper, authentic parts of ourselves. Also, this is our creative center. So this is activated when we're being creative and we're doing that kind of thinking. And it's also a little bit more of a risk taker as well. So it sees a lot of different possibilities, a lot of different solutions, and it's a little bit more of a risk taker, whereas the left brain will be a little bit more critical. Now, over the many years of my studies and also in my personal experience, I've noticed that society is a lefty. And, I want you to consider that most of us, by default, will go to a left brain process when we're up against a problem. And I also find that in business, many of us are trained, again, to use a left brain process, which, again, is not wrong or bad, but it does limit us. I'm finding that there's a whole process of this right brain that we're not tapping into, and that's a large component of the work that I do. So why do I think that our society is a lefty? Well, our education system was started in the Industrial Revolution, and this was important. We needed to know a particular kind of skill so that we can then have a particular kind of job. And this meant we need to be skilled in the sciences, math, and language. So if you remember how I was talking about the left brain, this is very much a left brain process. The problem is that our education system hasn't changed much since. So most of us go through school and we learn that science, math, and languages are most important, the arts are extracurricular, and the first thing to go when budgets are cut are the arts. So by default, most of us, as we grow up, we are trained to default in a particular way of thinking and use a particular kind of skill. When I've looked at the past 4 years of pay scale studies, I'm also noticing that our society puts more value on a left brain process. That's because the highest paying jobs are in economics, math, and engineering. And the lowest paying jobs are in arts, social work, and teaching. So there's also a value system in our society. So a lot of this is happening without an awareness. Most of us are going through this not really knowing that we aren't tapping into a whole part of our brain that's really essential. I can send this in the link with the slides, but there is an amazing talk by Sir Ken Robinson that I recommend everyone watch that's called Changing Education Paradigms. In this talk, he refers to something called divergent thinking and how our schools are not allowing for this essential capacity for creativity. And so then we go through school thinking very linearly instead of laterally, meaning multiple solutions to a problem. More specifically, he refers to a study in a book called Breakpoint and Beyond. And in this study, they were looking for a child's capacity for creative genius. And they started with a child at the age of 5 and then followed the child through adulthood. And what they noticed when they were studying for this capacity of creative genius was that 98% of children scored at creative genius levels. So if you leave with anything, if you remember anything I say in this webinar, what I want you to know is that every person is born with this amazing capacity for creative genius. And so whatever barrier you're up against, right, there's always a solution. And especially when it comes to employee engagement, you want to consider this too, that your employees all have this amazing capacity for creative genius. We just need to tap into it. We are born with it. Now, the bad news is what they noticed is as they followed these children into their adulthood, that capacity decreased. Now, I believe it didn't go away. It was just that they went through the education system. A lot of things happened to these kids, right? But our education system then taught them that they needed to rely more on a left brain process that's more linear, and it really cuts off creativity and limits possibility. So creativity is essential, whether it be in your volunteer programs or how you're interacting with your employees, and it's especially essential when you're trying to find your why. You know, I did some more research on creativity in the business place, and the Harvard Business Review recently showed, I think it was in 2004, they stated that the MFA is the new MBA. And in 2010, there was an IBM study of, I think it was about 1,500 CEOs in over 75 different countries, and the majority of them said that what's really crucial in leadership and in business is creativity. So the first problem that I see with my clients is they're not using their fullest brain's potential, that businesses and companies are tending to rely on this critical, limited, and analytical way of thinking. It's also, as a result of this, very impersonal. So it's really important to note that if you're trying to engage your employees, if it's impersonal and it's not touching them on a particular level, it's going to be difficult to engage them. So it doesn't help to rely solely on the left brain thinking when it comes to relationships with employees and when creating lasting results. We need to bring in the right brain more. We need to bring in the visual, the emotion, the authentic self. And when we do that by taking a look at the bigger picture. So another thing that I forgot to mention was right brain sees more in a big pictured way, kind of a bird's eye view, whereas the left brain will get very detailed and only see the details instead of the bigger picture. So the second thing that's missing with companies is a big vision, that overarching view, and a strong understanding of the company mission. The company mission is what I call the why. And many companies think they have this, but really they don't. And I'm going to explain a little bit more in just a minute. But first I wanted to talk about, okay, well, what is a vision? What is a why? So in this context, a why or a business vision is something that's inspirational. It is the company's stand. And if anyone here is the owner of a company, the stand of a company is also going to be your personal stand. So there isn't going to be a lot of difference between that. And it's also the impact that you want to make as a company. The problem is many of us create business visions with money being the goal. And I want you to consider that the money is not the goal. That money will be the result of fulfilling on your why. And the reason I say that is because the top performing companies all have a very clear vision and a bigger why. So the income is directly correlated to fulfilling on that vision. And this is also another problem I see with entrepreneurs is they chase the money. They're always looking for a way to, cut the bottom line, which I know is sometimes important, but it ends up with them really stuck and unfulfilled. And when you have a vision, you're able to connect to the right clients who want what you have. And it creates a good match, and naturally then you have this amazing flow of revenue. Another reason a vision and a why is important is because it acts as a compass for important decisions. So you always, when you have this bigger commitment in mind, it makes it easier to make really difficult decisions. But it also provides an anchor for the company and also for the team. You have this unified thing that everyone understands as the bigger end goal, and that allows you to not get swayed off course when things get really difficult. And finally, it really connects you to not only your ideal partners and employees, but your ideal clients. It connects you to who you want to serve. And just a short, interesting thing, and I don't know if this would be new to anyone here, because I know there's a lot of change makers on this webinar and people that are making a difference through their volunteer programs. But just with a company product alone, what studies have shown is that consumers are 60% more likely to purchase something, a product or service that makes a difference. And if there's two products that are exact same price, 92% will choose the product that makes a difference over the one that doesn't. So again, having a why that actually contributes to the world really makes a difference in terms of revenue these days. So knowing your why as a company is the #1 crucial step to performing on all levels for engaging employees and your customers, which of course, as we know, leads to revenue. But you're not going to find your why using a left brain process. You're not going to find that vision with an analysis and limited thinking. We really need to bring in the right brain. I want to give you an example of what I would call a left brain vision. And I am going to probably be throwing Citibank under the bus a little bit here. But I'm going to be referring to a mission statement that Citibank has used. This is often what companies think is their vision. They come up with a mission statement, and it refers to their key market and contribution and their distinction. These are all really important. They teach you in business school, but it's not the whole thing. So I'm going to be referring to Citibank's mission statement. This is what I would call more of a left brain vision. And what they say is, our goal for Citigroup is to be the most respected global financial company, and like any other public company, we're obligated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they're telling you what they do, but I want you to check in with yourself and say, are you inspired by this? You know, it doesn't really say much about how they're different from any other financial institution. So this is what I would call a left brain vision. So the right brain vision is your why. The why is at the core. Once you have the why, then you can figure out the how and the what. And without the why, everything else is really lacking. So the right brain vision, it's what lights you up in the morning. It's what's supposed to light your employees up in the morning too, right? Why should they get out of bed? And who do you want to impact? What's your mark on the world? And the purpose of the company. And again, remember, I can't emphasize this enough, but the results are always going to be in correlation to living your why. So here's an example of what I would call a right brain vision by Nike. And I want you to think again about the Citibank vision in comparison to this one. There we go. To bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. Very simple, but really kind of tugs at your heartstrings. It's like, wow, yeah, I want to be a part of that company. Way different from Citibank. So this is what you want to aspire to as a company. You want to have a vision like this that draws people in, that represents something that your employees want to be a part of. When you do this, you will be able to communicate more effectively. You'll be able to pivot and market more effectively. And when you have that clear why, it's going to be way easier to engage your employees. So much so that studies show that your employees will be 4 times more engaged if there's that overall purpose of your company and it's connected to their purpose. And they'll experience a 47% increase in a feeling of abundance and fulfillment at work. So I'm going to bring you through just a little bit of the process that I would bring my clients through to help them find their why or get way clearer on their why so that you can have all these amazing benefits. Oops. I think my slides got a little switched there. So that's what I was talking about, is the pivoting and the sales. One thing that I wanted to actually backtrack on is the why, the vision really needs to have that emotive component. If it doesn't touch your heart, how can you expect it to touch the heart of your employees? How can you expect it to touch the heart of your clients? It really needs to be profound. So it requires a deeper process. It's not something, unfortunately, that we can really get to in this webinar. I'm going to give you some tips on how you can start the process, but this is something that often takes many workshops with my clients, my corporate clients, and several months with my individual entrepreneur clients. But this is where you can start. You can start with what I call the trifecta of vision. The trifecta of vision looks at the intersection of 3 things: the interests and activities, the authentic self, and the heartbreak. Now, if you were, this would be something I would start with, you know, for example, the founder of the company, right? Because whoever founded the company needs to do this work first. And so we're going to look at, well, what are the things that that person's really passionate about in terms of interest? What is some of their best characteristics, the things that people compliment them on? So that would be the authentic self. And then this is the big one. What is the heartbreak? The things that you see in the world as problems that you would just love to solve. So this would be the core work that I would be doing with the main management company and the founder, because it's their company first and foremost, so the company needs to be a representation of their why. Then I take this trifecta and I do this exercise with everyone else in the company. So this could be good news and bad news, right? You may find that there's employees that don't have a why that matches up with the company why. And this could be bad news because it may mean that they're not a good fit for your company. But the good news is the more people that you have in your company that have a similar why and are really drawn to that vision, they're going to perform better and they're going to be more committed and they're going to be showing up to work differently. And it's going to be way easier to engage them in your programs. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, but this is the first step. Now, if you're curious about what your why is, you can start to look at these three things, and then where they intersect is your why. I'm just going to share a personal story as an example. So for me, I always loved being creative. Those are some of my interests. I was an artist since I was 4, starting with drawing on the walls, and I've been playing piano for 30 years. I also really love to teach and to learn. So those are some of my main interests. And my authentic self, meaning the things that people would compliment me on or the qualities that show up when I'm at my best, would also be, creative problem solving, guidance. I've been told I'm a really good listener, and I'm also a really good coach. Like, I help people get unstuck. And then the heartbreak is in relation to my biological father, who is an alcoholic. And trust me, my entire family has tried really hard to help him. And for whatever reason, he cannot overcome this disease. And it was really hard, a real struggle for me as a kid, to ask my father to stop drinking and see him not be able to stop drinking. And he just has not been able to see that he has this amazing potential, that he can really overcome this disease, that he has all these amazing things available to him in life. He's just unfortunately not able to see those things. So for me, my why is to really help people and companies fulfill on their fullest potential. And that started with an early childhood experience, an early heartbreak for myself. And the why, in terms of kind of how I'm doing it as well, is that creative process. I do it through coaching and teaching. So that's kind of at the core of all the work that I do. So that's a little bit of an example. I'm looking at the time, and I think we have a little bit of time to have some people maybe take a look at this and maybe ask a couple of questions about the trifecta of vision. So I could even give you just maybe a quick minute for you to jot down some interests and activities that you have, some of the authentic self, meaning great characteristics that show up when you're at your prime, and then also some of the heartbreak, some of the things the problems out there, the big problems that you want to solve. And again, this doesn't mean that you have to go out there and end poverty, right? My heartbreak was around alcoholism, but I've chosen not to go and work with alcoholics. It showed up in a different way, but it's very much related. So I would just like to give you just a few seconds while I'm talking here to just jot some of those down and start to notice where some of them intersect. And then just maybe if anyone would like to ask a couple of questions about this process, I'll answer some of those questions now before I move on. And then Tess, if you can just let me know what shows up in the chat box.
Okay, we don't have any questions in yet, but I actually had a question regarding the, finding the why. A lot of companies, are so large that, and the employee volunteer programs and CSR programs in the companies tend to be pretty small. You might not necessarily have a say in changing or, having a say in the why at all. So my question would be, how do you inspire your employees without being able to actually alter your company's why?
I'm going to get to that. That'll be at the end of the webinar. So I'll, if you could just hold on to that, I'm going to get to some more details. If your company, you might not be able to alter your company why. You might have to work with what it is, and that can definitely be a challenge. This is when you might want to actually, if there's someone that you can speak to help them understand that if they could really get clear on that why and have a different kind of why, that it would allow for better results, that would be great. But I know that not everyone has that power to bring it up the chain, right? It is a bigger company. But what I'm going to talk about is how you can start to learn about the why of your employees, and at the very least, you can communicate to their why to engage them in the program. So maybe you won't be able to use the company why, but you can use the individual why.
Okay, thank you. And we have actually another question that came in somewhat related to that. So if you have a large corporate company that doesn't even have a why, but all employees feel passionate about different causes and have different whys that they're bringing to the table, what can you do about that, and how can you bring those people together?
I want to make sure that I understand the question. So that there's a bigger company, maybe they don't have one unified why, but they have a lot of things that they're passionate about, so it's kind of coming from a few different whys.
Yeah, so the way that the question is worded is all employees feel passionate about different causes. How do you unify that?
Yep, I'm going to get to that.
Okay,
yeah, but I don't want to dismiss the question, so I'll answer it a little bit right now. Is sometimes we get a little confused on what a why is, and so you may think that they all have different whys, when really if you go a level deeper, you'll notice that there might be some, what's the word I'm looking for? Like that they all share a very similar why. And then you almost have to put your marketing hat on a little bit and use particular languages that will speak to everyone. But sometimes, it might seem like they have different things that they're interested in, but underneath the surface, the why is the same. So it would take a little bit more digging, and I would have to know more about the particular context and the particular programs to really give a full answer. But that would be the first thing I would say, is to start to maybe delve a little bit deeper.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of move on, because I know I definitely do want to get to the part of okay, how to wrap this all up into employee engagement programs specifically. I'm going to share my little secret sauce with you, the technique that I use in all my workshops with companies, and I'll explain why I use it. And it's going to seem a little different, right? But it works, and it's been really popular. And it's called a vision board. And vision boards can sometimes get a bad rap, especially if in this left brain world, anything creative can kind of be seen as woo-woo-y or arts and crafts. But this is something that I don't know anyone else that's doing this with companies, and it's highly effective because it uses the best of what we know in science and psychology. So you can, I've come in and I've done a workshop with employees or the teams, and I have them create a vision board that represents their why, and helps them kind of understand it on a deeper level. So for anyone here that maybe has access to a team, and maybe you can't involve the entire company, but you could at least involve some teams, this is a really great exercise to do to help get clearer on that why, and maybe even the why of your employee volunteer program, right? So, why do I'm using the word why again, but why do I use a vision board? Well, it's based in this concept that our brain takes in 400 billion bits of information per second, but we're only aware of 2,000. And what's interesting is that 90% of what our brain takes in is visual. So that means that most of what we're taking in is taken in through images, but the bulk of it we're not aware of. But that also means that a lot of the juicy, really important information that we're looking for is stored in our right brain through imagery. So when I do a vision board, it helps people get really clear on what it is they're trying to create. So this is a tool that anyone can really do. Of course, it's more effective if someone like myself is there helping you guide, but you can really use this science to be more effective in anything that you're doing. So using imagery or having things visually instead of just talking about them, using certain kinds of images in your marketing materials for your volunteer program can really make a difference if you're trying to engage them. It's the psychology of sales a little bit too, right? Using a particular kind of picture that would be more engaging, you may notice that more people sign up to be a part of that program. A couple of other facts about visuals, that people learn 30% more by seeing and doing. So maybe you're trying to engage your employees in something, but if you're just talking to them about it or writing to them about it, that might be really difficult to engage them. So maybe giving them a taste of something. So say there's a bigger volunteer program that you want them to be a part of that's, say, a day-long thing. Well, maybe if you could somehow create something that takes only an hour out of their time, is hosted at the company to give them a taste of what that program can offer, would help you engage them in the larger program. Also, images are processed 60,000 times faster than text. So again, if you want to get a message out to your employees about something, use images and color way more than just writing them an email or putting things, on a, I see this in offices where there's just like a piece of paper with some text on it, like, come join our program, and people will just pass right by it. Also, 40% of people, actually I think they're saying now almost 50%, are visual learners. So if you're struggling with someone in your company to help them understand something or teach them something, you want to consider that they're not understanding because you're talking to them. And when you actually show them, they'll be able to understand it. So this is an interesting little extra tip, that if you're kind of hitting your head up against a wall trying to explain something to someone and you just don't feel like they're getting it, try showing them through images or actually through activities. So once you've discovered the company why, or if you have a taste of the why and the mission, the key to success in engaging your employees is getting interested in their why. So I know that the question was posed, well, what if we can't change the company why? You might not be able to change the company why, but you can communicate the mission in a way that it will touch your employees in a particular way. But here I'm going to give you about 4 different ways that you can start to engage your employees in your programs by using the power of why. So the first one is you want to get involved, or interested rather, in your employees. So you want to get interested in what is their why, what's really important to them. And not just on the surface level. Not like, oh, I like this volunteer program, I like this volunteer program. But really to take a deeper dive. If you can have in-person interviews where you're asking them about the things that are really important to them, you can do that. You could put out a survey. So this is a really great way to get an understanding of what it is they want so that you can then give it to them. The second way is to offer variety. So some of you might have too much variety, right? You have a lot of different things that you're offering your employees. I would say that this could be a little bit of a problem just because you may be overwhelming your employees by offering too many options. So if you give people 10 different options, it's going to be harder to fill 10 of those volunteer programs versus just 2, giving them just a choice, a simple choice. On the flip side of that, if you're not changing it up and if you're a big company, for example, and you have a lot of different interests and you're only offering 1 or 2 programs a year, that might not be enough to really engage people. So you want to offer variety. But my suggestion is to offer the variety based off of what you learn by interviewing and surveying your employees. The third thing that I would say is to create a culture within the company. Again, I know some people here may not have as much power as they would like. This is something that I can sometimes work with my clients, is how do you get to the top and engage them and have them enroll the higher ups in understanding the importance of a why and creating this particular company culture. But as best as you can, you want to have a company culture that involves the why and involves the bigger vision. And a lot of the time, I think employees just see volunteer programs as another thing to do. They're already busy. They're already working really hard. You know, why would they want to give some of their extra free time to a volunteer program? Right, so this is a company culture issue, where if the company culture is putting the emphasis on you need to be working, you need to be working, you need to be working, then they're just going to be seeing the volunteer program as another thing that they have to do. And if it's a volunteer thing, meaning it's optional, they're most likely not going to choose it. So it's important to have some sort of shift in letting people know that the company values that you have fun, or that it's not just about work, or that volunteering offers something other than work. You know, so it's a complete shift so that your employees feel safe and comfortable taking time away from work to do the volunteer program. So I can't get into a ton of detail about that, but that's something else that you can also look at, is how can your employees feel more comfortable and know that the company volunteer program is not just another to-do. And the last one is fun and games. So making the volunteer programs fun and maybe even adding some incentive. So as human beings, we all really love to play. And this is something that's become a lost, it's just been lost in companies. And it's really important if you want to engage people. So one of the suggestions I have is, you know, you could have incentives such as rewards, meaning, oh, you know, someone that puts in the most volunteer hours or something gets some sort of reward. Or you can create a game out of it and create teams. And, you know, you have Team A and Team B. They can make up really fun names for their teams and see who can raise the most money for which charity or something like that. So where you build it in that the volunteer program actually becomes something fun and engaging, this also will improve the company culture. So this requires some creative thinking, but if you can look at how can you make it more fun for your employees and make some little contests or something like that, they're going to be way more likely to be involved. Versus, again, if it occurs for them as a to-do and just more work and more time being taken away from their family and their friends, they're going to be less likely to put themselves into that program. So those are my main suggestions in terms of engaging your employees into your program. And yes, sometimes there's certain barriers that require a deeper kind of a deeper solution, you know, especially for the bigger companies. But even with these 4 things, if you can start to look at some small steps that you can take, it will create a bigger shift in regards to engagement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave you with a last quote, and then we'll take more questions. But I really love this quote by Mahali. And his last name is Csikszentmihalyi, which is also a very difficult name to pronounce. But he says a leader will find it difficult to articulate a coherent vision unless it expresses his core values, his basic identity. One must first embark on the formidable journey of self-discovery in order to create a vision with authentic soul. So I leave you with those wise words. And I'm also just going to go ahead and put up the next slide, which is my contact information. Before we go into the question and answers, if anyone is interested in having me come and do this work with your company, if you think this is something that would be really valuable, you can schedule a consultation with me and we'll get on the phone and talk about what your company needs and what services I could offer. You can also follow me on various social media, Facebook, Twitter, and there's my website where I offer some resources for companies and individuals all about right brain thinking. And of course, I'm not just someone behind the screen. I really do invite you to email me if you have any questions or any thoughts, and that's my email address right there. So yeah, we have, another like 10 minutes for questions and answers. So Tess, if you want to come back on and let me know what people are asking.
Sure, we actually don't have any questions at this point. We can give people a couple more minutes to type some in if anyone wants to stay on the line and continue in the Q&A session.
Yeah, and if someone has like maybe a very specific question about something they're up against with their company, I could give some guidance on that too. Because I kind of gave a general idea in this webinar, but maybe using a specific example would provide some more insight.
Yeah, so I guess while we're waiting for some people to type in some more questions, one thing I was wondering if you can elaborate on is just kind of along the lines with the title of this webinar, with really uniting your employees around the company why. How would, once the why is communicated, whether that be the overall company why or something that you've created for your employee volunteer program, what would be your suggestions for communicating that? I know you mentioned the vision board and some visual messaging, but is there other ways that you can really ingrain that in just people's day-to-day experiences at their company?
Yeah, well, one of the things I see is a company might have a mission and a vision, and they don't share it with their employees. So the first thing is to start to communicate the vision to your employees more often. Maybe put it up in a main room where they're having their meetings a lot, maybe having a company event to kind of refresh this vision. And, this is a great thing to do in the beginning of the year, where you're like, hey, new year, and we're moving forward, and we want to remind you of our company mission. So just kind of reminding them of what the company's for. And then in terms of the messaging, what I would say is, yes, definitely visuals, but this is where, again, you need to kind of put on your marketing hat a little bit. And the messaging, the more you can really speak to the heart and the emotion, it will be more engaging than the what and the how. So instead of saying, hey, we have this volunteer program where we're going to be, I'm just going to kind of throw something out, volunteering at a homeless shelter, and you're going to be offering food to the homeless, right? That's the what. But maybe saying something along the lines of, maybe a statistic of how many homeless people there are, and that, just by volunteering 1 hour of your time, you could feed 100 homeless people. And, how would that make a difference for you to know that you've done something like that with your day? And so kind of having them understand the value of volunteering. And there's a lot of research out there that you can pull from. So helping them understand that when they volunteer, when they give back, it produces the feel-good hormones in our brains. And so it allows you to be happier at work and productive, both at work actually and outside of work. So you could also touch on some of the benefits, the concrete benefits of volunteering, in addition to that kind of heart-centered messaging. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah, thank you. And we've actually a couple more questions come in. So one of them is, how important is it to recognize multi-generational differences in terms of why a person would want to get involved with a project, or what would inspire them, basically?
Oh, that's such a good question. So the multi-generation, I would say it's definitely important. That's where you need variety. If you have a very big company and half of them are in their 50s and 60s, and then the other half are in their 20s and 30s, they're coming from completely different worlds. They might have very similar whys, but how you communicate to them is going to be very different. And so, it's going to take some research to find out what appeals to them. And also, not only the kind of volunteer programs, but like what exactly they'll be doing. And so I think the interviewing and the surveying would be especially crucial in order for you to find out what that gap is.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any general advice for an organization that has, they're starting from a place where employees have really bad attitudes overall? They're interested in the money, a pay raise, and that's it. I guess advice for a more extreme case like that?
Yes. Let's see. I think I might need more detail, but let me just think. So they're just kind of concerned with the money.
Yeah, so I can read you the exact wording of the question that might give a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
So this is coming from a nonprofit organization, and staff are always asking for a pay raise and are uninterested in anything else. They have low turnout at staff picnics, holiday dinners, things like that. So any ideas on how to turn around that attitude?
Well, I think what's going on there is possibly offering some educational, like valuable seminars for them to help them understand. I mean, it's very common. You know, people think money's the end all be all, and like that's it. But if there could be some sort of educational event that helps them see things in a different perspective, that might help. You know, so having them understand the value. I'm kind of going in circles, but I just had this aha moment that you just want to consider that they don't see the value in the picnics and the other things. And so I don't know how much of it is that they have a bad attitude so much as they're just not enrolled. And that's going to take a little bit more, but I think what needs to happen is you need to be interested in them. Really interested in what they want, and also when you ask them, okay, I get that you want more money, but what would the money provide you? You can get to the deeper aspects of what it is that they really want. Well, money would allow me to spend more time with my family, or money would allow me to travel, and then see if you can do something that involves family, that allows that, like, you know, to kind of giving back to them in ways other than money to improve the company culture. This is a tough one because I would have to know a lot more about the company to give you some more concrete answers, but I find in my experience that the more you get interested in what your employees are really about, the more committed they're going to be to the company. They may feel that the company doesn't really care about them. And I think that through asking some important questions and interviewing them and getting deeper into what's important to them and their values, you may see a shift just through those efforts.
Great, thank you. And we're just about up at noon now, so I think we probably shouldn't go to any more questions because then we'd go over one of your respectful times here. But thank you so much, Stephanie, for all the useful information. And just to reiterate to everyone that this webinar was recorded, so you will receive a link to the recording as well as Stephanie's slides. You should get those out. We should get those out sometime later today, so keep an eye out for those.
Great. And if I may add, if you have any additional questions, when you tweet with that hashtag, you can tweet to my username, and I'll respond back with an answer.
Oh, perfect. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll see you all on the next webinar. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, Tess.